Wells Fargo fired a dozen employees accused of faking keyboard strokes. That's coming up today on Business Matters. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here with me on this Friday. S&P 500 edged lower today, and with that, ending a 4-day run of record closing highs. So the main reason here is we've got a market that has become quite extended. So, a pullback today, more than normal here. You had a really big rally this week led by big cap stocks, but if you look beyond those mega caps, we can see a lot of actually weak areas here. And Adobe shares soared today after the company raised its annual revenue forecast. Today was actually its best day in more than 4 years. The forecast eased investor concerns that Adobe could lose customers to AI image generators like DALL-E. Results showed Adobe's AI efforts were paying off, like the Firefly image generating software it rolled out last year. And Americans are still taking a dimmer view of their finances. Consumer sentiment fell in June for the third straight month to a 7-month low. And this is according to the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index released today. Consumers still worried about persistent inflation, no surprise there, and as well as wages not keeping up. They're also not expecting inflation to let up in the near future. Consumer spending is a crucial driver of growth. We'll have more fresh indication next week when retail sales numbers come out on Tuesday. Let's move on from that to the Federal Aviation Administration. It is investigating how titanium with fake documentation made its way into commercial Boeing and Airbus jets. The investigation comes after small corrosive holes were discovered in the material, according to the New York Times. Spirit Aerosystems, which supplies the parts, says the titanium used in Boeing and Airbus jets was sold with counterfeit documentation. It has since removed the questionable parts from production. Spirit Aerosystems, the airline manufacturers, and the FAA are looking into whether those components pose a hazard to public safety. Airbus and Boeing say so far tests indicate there is no issue with the parts they've received. And federal authorities and Boeing are trying to figure out why a 737 MAX 8 did a rare and dangerous back and forth roll during a recent flight. So what happened was the incident on a Southwest Airlines flight May 25th. The Federal Aviation Administration says the oscillating motion known as a Dutch roll was an accident. It happens when the nose of the plane makes a figure 8 in the air. Aviation analysts say passengers would have been able to feel the plane move to one side, then the other side. No one was injured on the flight, which is good, and the plane landed safely. But the jet suffered what was described as substantial damage. The plane has not flown since landing in California. Now, talking about Wells Fargo, it recently revealed that more than a dozen employees were fired for simulating keyboard activity. NTD's John Marshall takes a look into the story of faking work.
Wells Fargo has terminated over a dozen employees after allegations that they were involved in a simulation of keyboard activity or creating an impression of active work, as reported by Bloomberg, citing filings to financial regulators. Cybersecurity expert Danielle Stepien has worked with big organizations like Amazon and the Pentagon. She says employers often use software to spot so-called quiet quitters.
If an employee is not being challenged at their job or sees growth, right, they may be inclined to quote unquote phone it in, right? And just, put a mouse mover or say like a keystroke type thing where it automatically does those types of actions for you on a computer.
It's not clear whether the Wells Fargo employees were working from home or what they were doing instead. With more employees working from home, employers often have to wonder whether they are actually working or slacking off. Many executives adopted employee monitoring software, also known as bossware, to monitor their staff's laptops. On the other hand, for the employees, is there enough data privacy protection for them when employers might be collecting more than necessary information?
So United States data privacy laws are, in my opinion, abhorrent. But in the EU, if you were, say, stationed and working in the EU in any regard, the GDPR data privacy laws protect you in some regard from corporate misuse of data, right? But in the US, you have almost no rights regarding that, no.
Many big banks have been trying to bring their workers back to the office. Last month, Citigroup asked its 600 U.S. employees to return to the office full-time. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Okay, moving on. Waffle House announced it's raising its pay and in some places its prices as well. CEO Joe Rogers III announced the raises for tipped workers in a video to employees. So base pay for servers will rise to $3 an hour this month, and they'll eventually reach $5.25 an hour in 2 years. There's also additional bumps in pay for seniority and particular shift work. Rogers calls this Waffle House's single largest additional investment in its workers in its 68-year history. So the boosts in salary for roughly 20,000 Waffle House workers will be offset by menu price increases in markets that have higher costs of living. Now, let's talk about Elon Musk. He might not get paid, even though shareholders have voted to reinstate his pay package. The legal system is standing in his way potentially. Here's the story.
The Delaware legal system still stands between Elon Musk and his $46 billion pay package. Shareholders voted to reinstate the package Thursday. But Delaware Judge Kathleen McCormick's decision to invalidate the package still stands. Tesla hopes to have her change her ruling.
We see in the filings that Elon Musk hasn't received a salary compensation since 2018. Yet Tesla continues to do well while he's in charge.
Attorney Katie Charleston says it's a matter of when Musk gets paid, not if. Regardless of what Judge McCormick decides, the losing side is likely to appeal. Attorney Greg Varallo, who represents the investors suing Tesla, told NTD, quote, "We still have work to do in the court and in the Supreme Court."
Everything can make its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court eventually. So there is a process, and it would stay in Delaware until it gets to a federal circuit court, and then could ultimately end up in the United States Supreme Court for sure.
Charleston says one of Musk's advantages is that major shareholders Vanguard switched sides. It now supports Musk's pay package, citing Tesla's performance.
Up next, the head of one of the oldest institutions on Earth today issued a warning about the future. So Pope Francis told G7 leaders that artificial intelligence must never gain the upper hand over humanity. He says, if we took away people's ability to make decisions about themselves and their lives, we would condemn humanity to a future without hope, and that is by dooming them to depend on the choices of machines. He especially condemned the use of AI in warfare in what he called lethal autonomous weapons and urged leaders to ban their use. Pope Francis is the first pontiff to address a Group of Seven summit. And staying on the G7, leaders also pledged to tackle harmful business practices by China. The G7 statement stressed that the coalition was not trying to harm China's economic development, but rather to protect Western businesses from unfair practices and to level the playing field. Markets in question here are including areas such as electric vehicles, steel, and renewable energy. The G7 also warned of action against Chinese financial institutions that have helped Russia obtain weapons for its war against Ukraine. Now, earlier today, I spoke to the author of the book, The China Crisis, James Gorey, and we discussed topics such as the decline of the Chinese economy and which nation could be in line to overtake China's manufacturing might. Here's what he says. James, thank you so much for your time. It's been a while since we spoke, but today I think we have a very interesting topic here. You wrote on the Epoch Times website an article titled The Hollowing of China. Very fascinating title. Tell us what it means.
Thanks, Don. It's good to be here. The Hollowing of China talks about the macro forces that are in play that are leading to the hollowing of the economy of China. Things aren't going great. China's seeing a deflationary trend in prices. They're seeing a fall in actual business and economic activity. There are a number of macroeconomic forces and domestic forces. One is the aging population. Aging populations don't improve per capita growth. Per capita production falls as the population ages. They also have a shrinking population. So you have less people working, and those people that are young people that are looking for work, 20, 30, 40% of them are out of work. So there's that. There's the fact that on the macroeconomic side, trading partners are trying to de-link and de-risk from China. That includes Europe, the US, Japan, other places. And domestic demand is cratering. So you have a lot of big forces that don't bode well for growth.
So in your article, you also wrote that China is replaceable. Now, a lot of countries around the world consider China to be the world's manufacturing hub, the world's factory, if you will. So are you saying that China is not the world's factory anymore?
Well, they are the world's factory, but that's changing. And they're not the factory that they were 10 years ago. So if you look at a recent example, a recent survey of American executives said, look, 61% would relocate to India in a heartbeat if the infrastructure were there. So India's trying very, very hard to build up their infrastructure. They've committed $130 billion or more to that end. So people are realizing, countries are realizing, businesses are realizing they can't trust China, and they don't want to do business. They want to insulate themselves from the nefarious practices that China typically involves in terms of IP theft, technological theft, and so forth.
Would you say the political aspect is motivating people to move out of China more than the economic factors? Which one is a bigger influence?
The geopolitical is a big influence, obviously. Absolutely. That's kind of that political risk is right now. So I would say that's a big one as well. But China's gone a long way towards disrespecting its economic partners, so its trading partners. So nobody's thrilled to be in terms of the way they used to be in terms of doing business with China. But yeah, the geopolitical risk is high in the Asia-Pacific region and elsewhere with the Ukraine war and support. So there's a lot of folks not happy with the political machinations and the political direction that China's taking in the world.
And you're saying that India will be the next big development story. How far away are we from that?
Well, interesting. China's economy is somewhere around 15 trillion. India's about 3.5 trillion. If India does 7% growth, then in 10 years or less, they will have doubled. And in another 10 years, they will have doubled again. So they'll eclipse China in 20 years, or at least meet them, assuming China's growth is much slower. And by the way, the jobs in India are, companies are already relocating there. Apple's relocating there, Tesla's building a factory there, other companies are looking, other auto manufacturers are looking at India. So it's already happening. So those jobs are going to continue to flow to India as India gets its infrastructure act together. And at the same time, where is China's growth going to come from? I mean, Li Qiang says, look, we're going to do 5% this year in growth. Where? More money flowed out of, investment money flowed out of China than flowed in. China saw a drop around 50% in direct foreign investment in May, year over year.
All right. A good note to end here. Thank you so much for your time today, James.
My pleasure, Don.
Staying on China here, Shanghai is allowing Tesla to carry out a pilot program for its full self-driving cars. 10 Tesla vehicles were permitted to carry out tests of most of the company's of the most advanced autonomous driving software, and this will help to pave the way for its rollout in China. Tesla has been offering FSD for a subscription in China for 4 years, but with a restricted set of features. Now, a successful rollout of its full self-driving software would allow Tesla to better compete with local rivals in China. A second Chinese drug maker has applied to sell a generic version of Ozempic in China. Ozempic is Novo Nordisk's blockbuster diabetes drug. The Chinese drug maker is called Livzon, a pharmaceutical. Its subsidiary has sought approval to sell the drug to control blood sugar in patients with type 2 diabetes. If approved, that means Novo will face competition in China. Its Ozempic sales in China more than doubled last year to nearly $700 million, accounting for 5% of its global Ozempic sales. And coming up after the break, some cities in the United States are now so expensive they're considered impossibly unaffordable. We'll tell you which ones. And Father's Day spending is expected to top over $20 billion this year. And we have some gift ideas for last-minute shoppers, so stick around. All right, thank you very much for staying with us. Here's what else is happening today. Microsoft says it's not going to roll out the new AI feature called Recall on its computers next week. The move comes after users raised concerns of privacy risks. Recall is an AI feature that records everything from web browsing to voice chats that enable the user to search when they need to remember from something earlier. And the Department of Defense has picked 3 aerospace companies to compete for national security space missions. It includes Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin, Elon Musk's SpaceX, and United Launch Alliance, which is a Boeing-Lockheed joint venture. The Pentagon said 7 companies bid for the program. The 3 companies will compete to launch critical military and intelligence satellites over the next decade. New York Community Bank Corp says it acquired the assets of the failed Signature Bank. The assets are worth about $38 billion in total. Signature Bank collapsed last year after depositors took out large amounts of money after another bank, Silicon Valley Bank, collapsed. U.S. home sales fell last month, close to the lowest level in the past decade. Sales fell 1.7%. Meanwhile, median sale prices rose to a record high, up from 1.6% from last month. This is according to a new report by Redfin. Fewer homes were listed for sale, which drove buyers to bid up prices. And U.S. import prices fell for the first time in 5 months. In May, it dropped 0.4% after a surge in April. The drop is largely thanks to the 2% drop in imported fuel prices. It could be good news for the inflation outlook. Now, several cities on the West Coast and in Hawaii now considered impossibly unaffordable. 5 cities made the list for most unaffordable places to buy a home, according to the annual Demographic International Housing Affordability Report. Unsurprisingly, the most expensive U.S. cities are in California. San Jose, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego all made the top 10. Honolulu came in 6 out of 94 major markets surveyed in 8 countries. The report measures affordability by dividing the median price of a house by the gross median household income. It also identified the most affordable cities of the 94 major markets. In the U.S., there are Pittsburgh, Rochester, and St. Louis. Meanwhile, the top impossibly unaffordable city in the world is identified as Hong Kong. Gas prices are cheaper than last summer and miles away from where they peaked 2 years ago. AAA says the national average for regular gas stood at $3.46 a gallon today. This is down $1.56 from the national record of $5.02 set in June of 2022. It's also down 13 cents from this point last year. Steadily lowering prices since mid-April have helped take pressure off cash-strapped consumers, and the cooling prices at the pump have also played a central role in helping to drive down inflation. Father's Day spending trends, we have also some gift ideas for last-minute shoppers. Here's more.
The National Retail Federation estimates consumers will spend $189.81 on gifts and celebrations per person this year, with total spending reaching $22.4 billion. That's slightly down from last year, but still much higher than pre-pandemic levels. Aside from greeting cards, clothes top the list of the most popular items for Dad this year, followed by special outings like sporting events, gift cards, or personal care items like beard trimmers.
We're also seeing some new areas of gifting really rise in popularity. things like personal care, sporting goods or leisure items, as well as things like automotive accessories, home improvement, and tools.
And if you're looking for ways to save on spending, Cullen says many retailers began offering discounts after Memorial Day. So keep an eye out for sales.
NASA announced today that the Boeing Starliner spacecraft is scheduled to return to Earth on June 22nd. On June 5th, NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams were launched aboard Starliner. They arrived at the International Space Station the next day. During their 24-hour flight, the spacecraft encountered 4 helium leaks and some failures of its maneuvering thrusters. They're aiming for a departure no earlier than June 22nd. This leaves open an opportunity for further extensions of time at the ISS. Depending on local weather conditions, the return to Earth is expected to last about 6 hours. They will target a location in the desert of Utah, New Mexico, or other backup locations. All right, and that's all the stories we have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. And if you have any feedback for the episode, please feel free to let me know. You can email us at business@ntd.com or leave a comment online. I do read them. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you back here on Monday.